Hey YouTube, this is Alexander, and this is my Nexus 4 versus Nexus 5 video comparison. So let's get started. Okay, so first off, there will be a link down below, some useful links talking about art, my Nexus 4 review, and my Nexus 5 review just for you guys, just for reference. But first, we're going to go ahead and start off with feel in the hand. So the Nexus 5 feels very light in the hand. It's very nice to hold it. It's a little bit taller and not much wider. I believe the thickness or the width is pretty much the same here. It is thinner. So that's pretty much, those are all pluses, because coming from the Nexus 4, it does feel a little bit more square or boxy. So it was kind of awkward at times to hold in the hand, but on the Nexus 5, it's a lot more rectangular. So that's pretty nice to, that's an addition, I would say. Another thing to note about the look and feel is that the camera housing on each, the camera housing on the Nexus 5 protrudes the body of the device, so when you place it down on a surface and you maybe want to access your notification drawer, you are going to hear sort of a tap going, tapping from your device hitting the surface of whatever it's on. So it does worry me a little bit about scuffing here in the corner, whereas the Nexus 4, because it sits flush, everything is flush with the device, it sits flush on the surface, you're not going to have that problem. Everything is fine. But because everything does sit flush and the speaker is on the back, there's a little bit of downside. This guy will get covered up if you sit it on a surface like this, whereas the Nexus 5 has speakers that shoot downward, but we'll get to that in a second. Overall, the Nexus 5 feels more premium. It feels a little bit nicer to hold, but the Nexus 4, the glass back, this is a D-brand skin, but I'm commenting on the glass back. The glass back also feels very nice. You can feel it heat up just a bit though if you're kind of putting it to heavy use, whereas the Nexus 5 you don't get as much of a problem. And you also don't have to worry about it slipping off surfaces like the Nexus 4 did. Now moving on to the displays of each. The display on the Nexus 5 is very warm, and I have, I believe, an image queued up here ready to go to show you guys that. Here's a beach image, both the same image. But if you take a look, you can notice that the beach over on the Nexus 5, the sand for example, is quite warmer and it seems more brown than it does over on the Nexus 4, and that's not the brightness. The brightness is the same. It just has a more warm display. The ocean also feels a little bit warmer than over here. It feels like a more cool blue. Same thing with the sky. So pictures and display is pretty much always going to be warmer. Now, is that a problem? Not really. If you don't have them next to each other all the time, or you're just using your Nexus 5, you're not going to really notice that too much, so it's not going to be a problem. Now, if you do notice it, it could be a little bit of an annoyance, like it is for me, since I know that it's warmer. But other than that, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not a huge deal breaker or anything like that. Both displays feel very sharp and crisp. I didn't notice any pixelation on each. They're both very nice to look at, so no worries there. They're both about 5 inches. This guy's 4.7, I believe, and this guy is 4.95. Very nice 720p display and 1080p. But anyway, they're very nice displays. So with colors, we're going to go ahead and talk about the cameras a little bit. They're both 8 megapixel cameras. This guy sports OIS, or optical image stabilization, to help with shaky hands, I believe, and low light images. The camera, let me just tell you, is significantly better over here on the Nexus 5. Go ahead and load up both shooters. For one thing, it does load just a tad bit faster. They were both already in memory, so that's one thing to note, but it does load faster. Shutter speed is faster. They're just all around, the Nexus 5 camera is a lot better. The colors are more accurate despite the display being a little bit warmer, so that's another thing to note that I really enjoyed. More accurate colors. You can also zoom in a little bit better, or a little bit further, and get a little bit more detail. You can also get more detail all around in your photos. So essentially, the camera on the Nexus 5 is a significant upgrade from the Nexus 4, and I really do enjoy using it. Now, is it top of the line? I wouldn't quite call it that, but it is a very nice camera for your pictures, and if you can go ahead and set up a couple of the different modes or settings that you have, you can tweak those a little bit. I would say this camera is very nice as opposed to the Nexus 4 being just okay and maybe taking really good shots here and there. The flashes are both fine. So moving on to the battery life of both has been pretty good since the 4.4 update. By the way, these are both on 4.4.2. The Nexus 4, I was not able to make it through a day at all until I got KitKat 4.4 and switched to Android Runtime or ART. As I mentioned, links will be down below for that. But I am able to make it through a day on this guy now. It's not my daily driver, but I am able to make it through a day with that. Now the Nexus 5 on the other hand, I'm able to make it through a day as well, but with a lot more screen on time and just a lot more general use. I don't have to worry about the device dying unless I'm on a phone call for an hour to 4 hours, which I am regularly. So if you make calls that much, you might want to carry around your charger or something like that. But unless, if you don't make calls that much, you should be fine with the battery. I'm completely fine with the battery as long as I'm not calling that much. That's pretty much all I can say about the battery. They're both very nice on 4.4 as long as you're running ART or ART in the developer settings. Now mind you, some apps are not compatible with it, but if you got all your apps that are fine with it, then I'd go ahead and run it. That's what I'm doing with both of these guys right here. Now just some last minor complaints about both devices. The cameras, or the front-facing cameras, are not centered. Now that does kind of annoy me. I've never used an iPhone 5 or a 5S, but the camera being centered must be nice, because when you're trying to take a selfie, you want it to be head-on. I don't prefer having it being at an angle like both these guys will provide. But it's a minor complaint. I just wish they were centered, maybe somewhere around this guy. Another thing to note is this guy does sort of get dust in here quite easily. Now I always try to keep my devices as clean as possible, but this guy, you're just going to get little bits of dust in there, so maybe blowing it in it, well, don't blow in it, maybe just get a little bit of compressed air and pull it back a little bit and try to get some of the dust out. But another minor complaint. Another thing that was a minor complaint on the Nexus 4 was the notification LED. Now this LED down here was really nice to have since I came from a Nexus S and didn't get an LED, but it wasn't very bright, so it sort of seemed kind of small and I didn't care for it very much. Even though it did help me, but it wasn't super helpful because it wasn't very bright. On the Nexus 5, it seems like they fixed that. It's very bright, which makes it appear a lot easier, and it sort of does appear a little bit bigger. So that's really nice. Little thing to note there. That's a plus over here on the Nexus 5. Another weird thing to note, well, not weird, but it's just a little different around the body. The Nexus 4 sort of has glass that curves into the body of the display, so when you're pulling your finger over from the edge of the display onto the display, it's got a really nice feel in it, and it sits flush with the top of the phone, so when you're on a phone call, it feels fine. Now over here on the Nexus 5, you have sort of a raised edge, which makes it a little bit hard to hold, or at least hard to pull your finger over from the side because it's kind of sharp and it's raised, especially when you're on a phone call for quite a while, because this raised edge will kind of, to me, it kind of annoys my ear and it almost hurts it a little bit because it's raised and it's sort of a little plastic lining over there just sort of hitting your ear the whole time you're on the phone call, unless you have headphones or something like that. But again, that's just a minor complaint, nothing too big there. And then lastly, there are some rattling. Because this guy is made mostly of plastic, you're going to hear a significant rattle when you have it on vibrate, as opposed to this guy being made out of glass and very sturdy. You're not going to hear very much of a vibrate coming out of this guy at all if it's on a hard surface. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this comparison. Overall, if you guys have a Nexus 4 and the camera is fine, you're okay with the 720p display and you can make it through a day on the battery life, I wouldn't really recommend updating. The reasons I would recommend updating to the Nexus 5 is if you want a better camera on a Nexus device, if you want the latest and greatest in hardware, you want to have the newest of Google's, Google's baby here, their Nexus device. I would go ahead and recommend upgrading for that if that's something you really want. If you need a bigger display, or if you just like the body, you felt it and you like it better, those are sort of minor reasons. But overall, if you are fine with the camera, the battery life, and the display, I would say the Nexus 4 is still a pretty good device. It's a pretty solid device that was still able to get me through what I needed to get through. I went ahead and picked up the Nexus 5 because the camera is better, the display is larger, the Nexus 4 display started feeling small after a while, and it's the latest and greatest Nexus, so that's pretty much the reasons why I picked up my Nexus 5. If you guys enjoyed this comparison, please go ahead and give a like and subscribe down there for more videos. If there's anything I didn't cover that you guys want to hear about, please leave a comment down below. Follow me on Twitter, Google+, and Instagram. And if you want to get this theme on your Nexus 4, go ahead and check out my post, which will be linked down below. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.